obscure city is a place where you can find many unique dangers. This is where she works, Cassandra Killjoy, paranormal private eye. Now a teenage girl's father has gone missing, and Killjoy believes that the city's enigmatic protector, the swordsman, is the key to finding him. So Killjoy must face many deadly dangers in her search for the swordsman. Available on Amazon.com.
After a few highs and lows, our beloved Rebel Alliance finally struck a major victory, but triumph is often followed by tragedy, as this marked the rise of a new empire. Greetings fanboys and fangirls, I'm Erod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster, and welcome back to a look back at Star Wars Animated. When we last left off, the original Star Wars cartoons of the 80s were met with moderate success. It wasn't until the early 2000s that Star Wars Animated found its stride, via a collaboration with the great Genndy Tartakovsky. But sadly, that collaboration came to an end, and Lucasfilm had to look for someone else to helm the next era of Star Wars Animated. Enter Dave Filoni, a very talented animation director and writer with very impressive credentials and an unconditional love for all things Star Wars. Unfortunately, his first efforts with the franchise were inadvertently sabotaged when they were released as a feature film instead of a show, resulting in low box office, bad reviews, belligerence from the fanbase, and his original character, Ahsoka Tano, being labeled as one of the worst characters in the franchise. Fortunately for them, Stuart Snyder, who was the head of Cartoon Network at the time, had an unshakable belief in the show and wanted to move forward with it in spite of the movie's failure. He even went as far as to saying, and I quote, that he didn't want to see Clone Wars anywhere else other than on Cartoon Network.
Return of the Clones.
When Dave Filoni and Henry Gilroy were first brought on to create Star Wars The Clone Wars, they created a completely different show than the one that we got, as the scale of the show originally was much smaller and they were not given access to a lot of the Star Wars characters. This completely changed as soon as Warner Brothers and Cartoon Network became involved. Suddenly, the scale of the show got much bigger and they were given access to almost every character in the Star Wars universe, including Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Remember that, because it's gonna be important later. The first time we as fans ever heard of Star Wars The Clone Wars was back in 2005, during Star Wars Celebration 3, where George Lucas himself announced that they were making a 3D continuation of Genndy Tartakovsky's microseries. Hell, the project was so heavily influenced by the microseries at the time that character designer Killian Plunkett even admitted that his initial designs were heavily influenced by Genndy's. However, later, George Lucas and Dave Filoni revealed that the final result was much more influenced by Thunderbirds. At the time, the head of Lucasfilm fan relations, Steven Sansui, referred to the series as the next generation of the Star Wars saga, a cutting-edge 30-minute 3D computer animation series based on the Clone Wars that takes place between episodes 2 and 3. Suffice it to say, excitement for the franchise was at an all-time high. Star Wars The Clone Wars premiered on Cartoon Network on October 3rd, 2008, with pretty impressive ratings and generally positive reviews, and would go on to have a successful 6-season run, in which the ratings were high, the merch was moving, and most surprising of all, Ahsoka Tano went from one of the most hated characters to one of the most popular ones in the franchise, to the degree that she now has her own live-action series on Disney+. The cast from the animated movie, of course, returned for the series. James Arnold Taylor, Matt Lanter, Ashley Eckstein, D. Bradley Baker, Corey Burton, and T.C. Carson, along with some of the actors from the live-action movies, like Anthony Daniels, Matthew Wood, Liam Neeson, Pernilla August, Daniel Logan, Ahmed Best. Ian McDermott would take over as Emperor Palpatine when the original voice actor Ian Abercrombie sadly passed away. And while Ray Park didn't voice Darth Maul in the series, he did provide capture motion for his fight scenes. And for those of you who haven't seen Star Wars The Clone Wars, yes, somehow Darth Maul returned. Furthermore, this series also introduced a few characters that have now become Star Wars mainstays, like con artist, pirate, and lovable scoundrel Hondo Ohnaka, played by Disney legend Jim Cummings, the badass bounty hunter Cad Bane, played by Corey Burton, who also voiced the live-action version of the character on the Book of Boba Fett, and the Mandalorian bombshell herself, Bo-Katan Kryze, played by the lovely and talented Katie Sackhoff, who would go on to play the character both audibly and physically in The Mandalorian, making her the first actor from Star Wars Animated to reprise her role in live action. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, Star Wars The Clone Wars was one of the top shows on Cartoon Network. The series provided a more intimate, engaging, and relatable portrayal of the Clone Wars, focusing on multiple characters, bringing a few supporting players from the background into the forefront, and only servicing the Skywalker saga occasionally. During the first 2 seasons, the show was episodic, and was largely comprised of standalone episodes. But starting with Season 3, the show became serialized, meaning that each episode would continue on to the other. According to most fans, this is the era in which the show started to really feel like it was part of the Star Wars saga, and became required viewing for all true Star Wars fans along with the movies. Suffice it to say, things were going well and Clone Wars wasn't showing any signs of stopping anytime soon. And then along came a mouse. On October 30th, 2012, Disney acquired Lucasfilm for $4.5 billion. And while they had every intention in continuing the saga, they had no interest in producing a show for a network that was owned by their competition. So in spite of the fact that Star Wars Clone Wars Season 7 was already in production, along with a spin-off series that would focus on a team of clone troopers, Clone Wars was abruptly cancelled, as Disney wanted an original Star Wars series for the new channel Disney XD. So yeah, Dave Filoni and his crew were expected to pull a brand new show out of their ass. Luckily, Uncle Dave had an ace under his sleeve. Remember how I said that the original version of Clone Wars was way different?
Rebels Rising.
Originally, when Dave Filoni and Henry Gilroy were under the impression that they wouldn't have access to Obi-Wan and Anakin, they intended to center the show around a ragtag band of smugglers that would travel around the galaxy in a Millennium Falcon-style ship, participating in the Clone Wars but from behind the scenes, providing an outsider's perspective. However, when the scale of the show changed, those plans were scrapped. Fast forward to 2012 and Disney wants a new show. And lo and behold, Filoni and Gilroy still had all the pre-production material from that original version of Clone Wars. So they moved the timeline of the show forward, from the Clone Wars to 5 years before the events of New Hope. They tweaked the characters a little bit to suit the time period, and they changed the narrative to now tell the story of a bunch of misfits and outlaws who inadvertently inspired the creation of the Rebel Alliance. The show was officially announced on May of 2013 to a lukewarm reception, as word had gotten out that Season 6 of Clone Wars would be its last, and fans didn't want a new show. They wanted more Clone Wars. Thus, Star Wars Rebels would go on to premiere on October 3rd, 2014. Just 2 years after the Disney deal, to moderate but steady ratings, generally positive reviews, and very high merch sales. So thankfully, while the fans missed Clone Wars, they didn't miss it enough not to give Rebels a chance. Most of the same crew from Clone Wars carried over to Rebels, plus a few new faces, including the legendary creator of Gargoyles, Greg Weisman. However, a whole new cast was assembled to voice the new heroes, including Freddie Prinze Jr., Taylor Gray, Vanessa Marshall, Steve Bloom, Tia Sircar, and Dave Filoni himself as our hero's belligerent astromech, Chopper. Now, while the central cast was new, that didn't mean that the cast from Clone Wars was out of the picture, as most of them guest starred on the show, including James Arnold Taylor, D. Bradley Baker, Jim Cummings, Corey Burton, Sam Witwer, Phil Lamar, Matt Lanter, Katie Sackhoff, and everybody's favorite, Ashley Eckstein as Ahsoka Tano. As per tradition, a few actors from the live-action movies also reprised their roles, including Ian McDermott, Anthony Daniels, Forrest Whitaker, Billy D. Williams, and James Earl Jones as Darth freaking Vader. Oh yeah. The show would go on to have a stellar 4-season run. Rumor has it that the show was supposed to end with our heroes stealing the plans to the Death Star and delivering them to Princess Leia, but the powers that be allocated that story to Rogue One. However, I am yet to find any evidence of this, so a rumor it remains. With that said, there are a few overt references to Star Wars Rebels in Rogue One, so make of that what you will. I think what made this show special is that it had its own flavor, and the creators didn't rely on what worked on Clone Wars to make Rebels work. While Clone Wars was a love letter to the prequel movies, Rebels was a love letter to the original films, casting a light on a band of reluctant heroes who are just trying to get by in an unjust universe, and their inability to conform accidentally leads to them starting a revolution. The show is like Leverage and Firefly had a lovely Star Wars baby. But sadly, the rebellion was not meant to last forever, and the show came to its epic conclusion on March 5th, 2018. But that was not the end of Rebels, as they have continued to make appearances in the live-action Disney Plus shows, and their story even continued in the live-action Ahsoka series. Sadly, the end of Star Wars Rebels marked the beginning of the end of Star Wars cartoons on cable television. But on our next look back at Star Wars Animated, we will see how that paved the way for Star Wars to conquer the next frontier: streaming.